Hi everyone, Maria here, and welcome to Season 1 of GGUTTALKS, WGUTT, a podcast focusing on business and tech for good, experience design, and gut feelings.
That's going to be, I'm not going to say a provocative one, but what's a jam, what's a sprint, and what's a hack for you? Because I know as well that there's a buzz around sprints too. Yeah, I personally see them. They fit in the process, but a sprint alone will not solve anything on its own.
This is really, again, it's a definition thing. We have the word sprint as it's used, for example, in Agile or in Scrum to mean a work section, a rhythm of your working. We know with a sprint and a retrospective and sprint and retrospective. That's one type of sprint. What we often see is now also is the design sprint, popularized by Google, people like AJ and Smart and so on, who are doing really good work with that stuff. Then you see people who see that as some kind of panacea, some kind of, a healing for everything. You can do everything in a sprint, and you can't. I mean, I'm a great lover of accelerated formats. The Jam is an example of that. And there are wonderful things you can do in 48 hours or in a week or in 2 weeks or in 4 hours, whatever it is. But there's a huge amount of stuff that you can't do in that time. So we usually call it jams because we try to examine the problem as much as the solution. Yeah. Whereas sprints tend to start by validating a problem and then going into solution space. That's just a tendency. People use the words differently. And we use them a lot, but we don't use them to try and solve a whole problem unless it's a very small, very localized problem. Yeah. We use them to get attention for a way of working or for a particular change that's happening. We use them to do a very quick 360, like an early iteration in a project, which mobilizes lots of people and brings the right people into the room. So you can map out, it could be over here, it could be over there, those people should be involved, these people should be involved. You can find that out practically. We use them for training, to actually learn techniques and so on. And I think that's what sprints are useful for. I mean, I've produced some graphics around this where I have like a picture of a whole bunch of fruit on one side or vegetables and just a chili bean on the other side. Yeah. And the chili bean is labeled design sprint and all the fruit and veg is labeled design. Yeah. Or the Flash is labeled design sprint and all the superheroes are labeled design. So what I often say is don't do your design in sprints, do sprints in your design. Yeah. Or don't do your innovation in sprints, do sprints in your innovation. And that's a fantastic time to use them because of that focus of resources, that luxury of not thinking about something else all day. Yeah. That is so valuable. And also because it lets you activate so many people who then become, if you like, fans or allies of your project. And that is so useful going forward.
Yeah, I like that. Actually, each project is different. So for me as well, the sprint fits into the process.
Absolutely.
And it's a great way to achieve things and deliver and see, because people see the results really quickly, like, wow, in a week I did that. But it's not alone. Like, it's not a standalone process.
Unless it's a very, very limited project. Problem. Or you do it with the intent of not using the results. So, for example, I've done jams in a context of, I can't mention the client, but a large organization had a big change of leadership in one of its main sectors, one of its main departments, if you like. Yeah. And hundreds of people work in that department, and the future was going to look different. And so we ran with them a jam with 700, I think 700 participants in one location. It was an amazing thing with 50 facilitators and so on. And we said, okay, our world is changing because of what's happening outside and now inside the organization. Let's imagine we can reach forward 10 years or 9 years into the future and bring back something. We bring back a way of working. We bring back an artifact from the future, the minutes of a meeting, whatever it is. Yeah, let's build that now. And that was a smart choice they made to set it sort of 9 years in the future because nobody expects to build what comes out of that sprint. Yeah, it was just a thought experiment to say, this is how the world works now. Yeah, we're trying to actually do something, and we're knocking into new barriers that weren't there last week, and we're finding where there are barriers last week, there are now no barriers. So we're exploring our new potential by doing this. that's a really useful thing just in itself. Yeah, that stands alone. But that's not part of a serious innovation project. That's part of a learning experience or an exploration experience or maybe a community building experience.
One thing you touched on as well is you're not gonna, the best way to explain what service design is or service design thinking is to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been said for a long time. People say,
absolutely.
You've got to try it. It's like if you describe a sport to someone. Let's say you describe ice hockey to somebody, but they've never seen it. Yeah?
Yeah.
They're never going to really understand what it's like, feel the energy, the speed, the power of it, understand if they like it or not. If it's useful for them until they get at least into a stadium or better still on the ice. And then you understand. What the game's about.
It's the same thing for entrepreneurship as well. You're not going to read a book and become an entrepreneur or whatever. So, but I relate to that one because last year I was giving a design thinking workshop, just to business students. And because of social distancing and all of that, I had someone from the university when I was there on site who was like, one person would do it and the others will watch. I'm like, well, we spent 3 days like that, doing what? They're not gonna. I said, no, we just find another way because they didn't want to do it remotely. But this is exactly what my response was. What are they gonna do? I'd rather not do it, because absolutely. There's no point.
It's like those old paintings of early surgery where you have sort of the cadaver, the dissected body down there on the table with 2 or 3 surgeons like working on it, and up above them are all these rows and rows of students with their notebooks writing down what's happening. And they still do that in surgery because cadavers are valuable resources which someone has given. But there's a point where you have to pick up the knife yourself.
Yeah, sure. That's why today, with what's happening with the VR and AR and so on, now students or even surgeons and so on are learning alternative ways as well.
That's great. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and I just want to ask you, because you showed your chicken, but I think everyone can imagine your rubber chicken. So that's your best mate. How did you meet?
So I've been using rubber chickens for a long time in my work, and my first one was a gift from a good friend who at the time was an American service person stationed in Germany, and I was actually out in the woods doing some volunteer activities there, and these 2 cars pulled up, and the cars emptied, and 8 American service people got out of the cars, in civilian clothes, but you recognize them with the haircuts and stuff like that, especially at that time in the early 90s. And they got out of the car and they handed me a rubber chicken and a roll of duct tape and said bye, and left. And it was just sort of a drive-by gifting by a friend of mine. And I'd always wanted a high-quality rubber chicken. And by the way, there are very different kinds of rubber chicken. You get the ones that dogs chew, the squeaky ones, which are great. I love them, and they're quite cheap and so on. And then you get the more advanced ones like this, which you can't see, but I'm describing it. It looks much more like a real chicken. It's got kind of feather marks on it and so on, and it's painted quite realistically. This is a juggling chicken. These are used by clowns and jugglers, and they're much more difficult to find, and they're much more expensive. And it was one of these, so it was a precious thing. It was a real professional level rubber chicken, and I thought, this is interesting, because what does this say about me if I carry this thing around, and what does it do to the context it's in when it comes out? So you'll find in my practice, I'm often working with quite large organizations, usually with people in that organization who are a bit relaxed and want to change things or have a drive to push things forward. But a lot of the colleagues around them are not like that. They think things are fine the way they are, and many things are fine the way they are. So I don't lead with a rubber chicken. I lead with a suit. Marcus and I wear suits at work nearly all the time. We talk business. But at some point, we need to approach the more human side of this, or it can be useful, certainly to approach the more human side of this. So at some point, maybe the tie comes off, maybe the PowerPoint becomes a flip chart, maybe the jacket comes off, and maybe at some point the rubber chicken comes out, because we just need a different mindset, or we need a thing to use as a prototype. It can be a phone, it can be a device, it can be...